Welcome back for another episode of the Blacksburg Buzz. I'm your host, Kyle Bean. Today we're going to be going over the Hokies' trip to the ACC Semifinals today, where they did end up falling to Notre Dame. Now, it was a little bit like yesterday's game against Miami, where Tech kind of struggled to shoot and they didn't really find their rhythm. It was a little bit of a weird game for them, but this one they weren't able to pull through and get the win. Notre Dame is a really good team, and going up against Hannah Hidalgo, Sonia Citron, I mean this is a tough group to battle with, especially when you're not playing well. You don't have your best player. Just nothing was going right for the Hokies. So they did end up falling 82-53 on Saturday. First quarter, it was pretty close. Notre Dame, they definitely got off to a hotter start than Tech did, but Tech really pulled back a little bit at the end of that first quarter. They made a push and they brought it within 3. So you weren't feeling bad about the game. You'd like to have a lead, but 3 points is just a toss-up at the end of the first quarter. You can't complain too much. Just a slow start for the Hokies. Then moving into the second quarter, scoreless for the first 4.5 minutes. Tech couldn't get anything. And this was really the pattern for the game. We didn't know what was going to happen. You kind of hoped that maybe they would find their stride at some point in this matchup. But this was the first of many long scoring droughts for the Hokies. So 4.5 minutes to open up the second quarter without a bucket. Notre Dame, they got a couple of threes and they took a pretty commanding 11-point lead in that second quarter. You could tell that while they weren't playing great, they were playing a lot better than Tech was. They looked a lot more connected. The ball was moving better. Turnovers weren't as big of a problem for the Fighting Irish. So Notre Dame had things going. Tech did not. They ended up doing a little something after that 4.5 minutes. Olivia Summiel, she hit a pair of free throws and a 3, gave Tech a little bit of a boost. And then Amor put a few buckets in. She made 3 to cut the lead to 4. And at that point, you were feeling pretty good. Maybe Georgia Amor's figuring out her shot a little bit. She'd been struggling the last couple of games with efficiency and such. So maybe things are starting to work themselves out, and we're going to see this team really become what we know that they are. So feeling pretty good. And then another scoreless stretch. The last 2.5 minutes of that second quarter, they can't get anything, and they're down 10 at halftime. So you saw a little glimpse of just the Tech that we know. We saw a glimpse of it there in the second quarter, but not much. And just hoping that the Hokies can come out with that third quarter blitz they talk about all the time and really get things moving and take over this game. Well, someone did have a third quarter blitz, but it was not Virginia Tech. Notre Dame came out firing on all cylinders. They absolutely cooked to open up the third quarter. Continuing off of those last couple second quarter buckets, Notre Dame continued that stretch, and they made it a 20-0 run. Absolutely took over the ball game, and at this point, you knew that things were not looking good for the ACC tournament. It was probably over at this point. Plenty of time left on the clock, but you're losing time rapidly as it keeps winding down. Notre Dame is really finding their stride here in the third. The Hokies haven't really shown much of anything except for that 2-3 minutes there in the second quarter, and things are really looking bad. They finally started to make a couple shots late in the third, but they couldn't really do much with such a big lead for Notre Dame. They couldn't really cut into it much at all. They go into the fourth quarter down 21. It's one of the biggest deficits for the Hokies all year. We rarely see them losing, and we really rarely see them losing by more than 10, 15, but 21 headed into the fourth quarter. Things are not feeling good here in Greensboro. Fourth quarter, they did get off to a really good jump. They ended up cutting down to 15, so you saw some promise once again. They had some back-to-back buckets and got a couple stops, but 15, still a tall ask. Really tough to come back from 15 in one quarter, but you see just a glimpse of hope there, just a little bit. But after that little just hint of promise, Notre Dame just comes right back. They did it all over again. They had a great run, and Tech goes ice cold again from the floor. Notre Dame, they grow their lead all the way up to a peak of 32 points. Really, really rough look for Tech, especially in what would end up being their last game before March Madness. Going down 32, Virginia Tech, that fourth quarter, after their hot start, they cooled off really, really bad. Scored 7 points in the final 8.5 minutes of the fourth quarter. It was just a game of scoring droughts, and Tech just couldn't do anything. Notre Dame, they shot pretty well all game, 52% from the floor, 64% from three. They were really good behind the arc, and they made 9 of 10 free throws. So 9 out of 14 on their threes. That's a really solid day. They were hitting it from all over. They had a couple players just shooting the lights out that we'll go over here in a minute. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, 30% from the floor, 29% from three, and 43% from the free throw line. They made 3 out of 7 free throws. So struggles all across the court for the Hokies, but Notre Dame had a couple players leading the way. They had 4 in double digits. It was Sonia Citron, 19 points, 7 rebounds, 1 block, and 3 steals, doing it on both ends. She cooked all day. You knew that she was going to be a problem as one of Notre Dame's leaders, but she really took the reins and was playing phenomenally all game. Maddie Westbeld was really good as well. She had 18 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, and 1 steal. So once again, that duality, really cooking on the offensive end and putting up some turnovers on the defensive end. Westbeld was just everything for Notre Dame. She made quite a few threes, a lot of them in coverage as well, and just played phenomenally all game. Hannah Hidalgo, you knew her name was going to come up. 15 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 steals. It's Hannah Hidalgo, ACC Freshman of the Year. You knew that she was going to show up to play against Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament, and that's exactly what she did. Following her, Anna DeWolf, 14 points, 5 assists. Good game from her as well. Those were the 4 Fighting Irish players in double figures scoring. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, just 2. Georgia Amor, she did everything she could. 24 points, 3 assists, 2 steals. Once again, she kind of struggled with her efficiency. 11 of 29 field goal shooting and 2 of 8 from behind the arc. The Hokies just haven't been able to find it in March. The shooting just hasn't been there. They've cooled off from everywhere. It's been kind of startling to see. Olivia Summiel was the only other Hokie that reached 10 points. She had 10 on the dot, and she had 18 rebounds, 7 on the offensive end. That's where Summiel really helps the most, and she was cooking on the boards. But Tech did struggle a lot to convert off of those offensive boards, and that was one thing that really hurt them, which we'll get into in just a minute. I I think the biggest thing that worries me about Tech headed into March Madness is Matilda Eck. I don't know what's going on with her, but she has disappeared in the last 3 games. She was what I would say the Hokies' third option on offense, and with Kitley gone for who knows if she comes back in March Madness, but with Kitley gone at the moment, Matilda Eck kind of moves into that second scoring option, and she hasn't put up a single point in 3 games. Just the shooting just hasn't been there for her. It's really worrying moving into the most important part of the season. You've got to hope that she can figure it out on the offensive end. There's not much time left to do it. She will have a little bit of a break before we get into NCAA tournament play, but you've got to hope that she can figure out what's going on because she hasn't scored a single point in 3 games. 0 against Virginia, 0 against Miami, and now 0 against Notre Dame. It's very concerning to see one of the Hokies' leading scorers and best options on the offensive side hasn't scored in 3 games. She's been 0 for 13 from the field over the last 3, and it just puts a big question mark on what this team can accomplish this year. Turnovers, they were an issue for Tech today a little bit. Notre Dame, they're a really good defensive team. Hannah Hidalgo leads the country in steals, so you know that turnovers can become an issue easily against the Fighting Irish, but you were hoping it was something that Tech could minimize. It wasn't terrible for them, but 14 certainly isn't a good number. It did lead to quite a few points for Notre Dame, 16 to be exact, and I think that would have made a really big difference in the game. If they could cut, 6, 8 maybe of those turnover points out of Notre Dame's total, it all of a sudden becomes a whole different game because, when you take away 6, 8, 10 points at halftime, maybe you're only down 4 or 6. Going into the fourth quarter, maybe you're only down 15, and, the Hokies' run cuts them into single digits. It really does change the game a lot if you can cut out a few turnovers and a few of those points from them. I think that would have helped Virginia Tech build a little bit of momentum on a day where they struggled to make shots. And that's definitely one thing that hurt them quite a bit. Sloppy defense during stretches was another problem for the Hokies. They had a few just segments of time where they couldn't put up a stop and they looked a little rough on the defensive end. We know that some of that can be attributed to the fact that 3 freshmen were playing significant minutes. Just the inexperience there really shows itself the most when you get into postseason play where everyone's on their A game, trying their hardest. You're playing the best teams. You're playing, every day. So having 3 freshmen in, while they're all very talented and they've had fantastic freshman seasons, it did start to show a little bit on the defensive end during some of those scoreless stretches for the Hokies where, players were getting frustrated and you could just see that things weren't going the way that they planned. So Tech, they had their struggles on the defensive end. I think a lot of that was just inexperience, but nonetheless, you want to see the defensive side improve a little bit better. And just in terms of the consistency, generally, they're a pretty good defensive team, but you can't let up for 5 minutes and allow Notre Dame to run up the score. You have to stay consistent and keep yourself in the game when you can't make shots. We also saw a pretty bad injury on the floor once again. You hate to see it. Kylie Watson went down with what appears to be a pretty serious knee injury. Obviously, we don't know exactly what it is yet, But watching the game and looking on Twitter, hearing from other people who were there or watching, it does appear that this could be an ACL injury. You hate to see it happen to a player just right now, sort of like Kitley. Just this is the worst time to get one of those injuries. You've played all year. Now you're heading into the postseason. You're in the ACC tournament. You're advancing into the final tomorrow. And in the second half of this game, she landed kind of awkwardly and just crumpled to the floor. She was assisted off. She came back out of the locker room a little bit later in the game on crutches, so it doesn't look good for Kylie Watson. You've got to feel for her. This is a terrible time to get hurt, and it feels like we've seen so many knee injuries and pretty serious ones happening lately, and it's sad to see so many players going down, so many really talented players going down at this point in the season when you know that probably all that these players have dreamed about is playing in March Madness. And whether they've had opportunities in the past or they will in the future, it's still heartbreaking to see this happen, when you're right on the brink of doing something amazing. So unfortunately, after all this, the Hokies can't pull off a win and make it to the finals tomorrow. Notre Dame will be playing against NC State, so that'll be a good matchup on Sunday. Hokies end up falling 82-53 in the semis to the Fighting Irish. Tough way to go out, but hopefully they can figure out all of their struggles in the coming days. Hopefully Liz Kitley is feeling up to playing in March Madness. We still have no idea what her injury actually is. They're very hushed on that. Could be because they just don't want to say and she'll be back soon. It could be because it's really serious and she won't be playing at all for the rest of the year and they don't want to affect seeding. We really don't know. But nonetheless, we'll have some Hokies basketball coming up soon with March Madness. We've got the men's ACC tournament next week. I'll be there for that, so I'll try to get you guys some really fun content from DC with the ACC tournament. Hokies are going to be playing. It's going to be a great time up in the district. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.